Alright, so what is the difference between 5.56 and 2.23? Because you can check the outer diameter, or dimensions, and they're exactly the same. I mean, yes, they will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer slightly, like overall length, trim length, stuff like that. But if I had a whole pile of 5.56 and a whole pile of 2.23 from a whole pile of different manufacturers, and it wasn't stamped somewhere, I would not be able to pick out which cartridge is which cartridge just by specs. And like I said, you can go and try this yourself. So, okay, well, the specs are exactly the same on the outside. Well, what about on the box? Well, this is 223. It's a 55 grain, full metal jacket, boat tail. It's flying at 3240. Okay. Well, here's M193 5.56. It's a 55 grain, full metal jacket, boat tail. On a 16-inch barrel, it's flying at 3180. On a 20-inch barrel, it's flying at around 3240, 3250, somewhere in there. So the numbers on the box are exactly the same. So why is one marked 223 and one is marked 5.56? And some of this information I just recently found out. So let's go over it. Now, obviously, again, different manufacturers, you'll get slightly different things. But generally speaking, when you're purchasing M193 or 5.56, what can you expect? Number one, a crimp primer. So on the 5.56, the primer, you probably won't be able to see it, so I'll just roll in pictures. There's a crimping holding the primer into the casing. On the 223, there is not. Now again, every manufacturer is going to do something different. Some 223 manufacturers are going to crimp the primer. Some 5.56 manufacturers are not going to crimp the primer. But generally speaking, you will get a crimp primer on 5.56. Next one, cantilever. So actually this particular 223 has a cantilever. I know I got one without one. 1 second here. Ah, the second one right there. That does not have a cantilever, and that is marked as 223. Again, generally speaking, with 5.56, you should get a cantilever. What is a cantilever, you may ask? Well, I have a couple examples. If you can't see it well, don't worry, I'll roll in some pictures. So as you'll notice on this lower projectile, right here there's a cut in the bullet. That is so when you crimp it, the brass will flow into there and the brass will hold the bullet tighter. On this top one, there is not a cantilever. Typically, again, we're talking about general terms. Generally speaking, without a cantilever, you'll get a little bit more accuracy. With a 5.56, you should get a cantilever. Next one, full metal jacket boat tail. The recipe for 5.56 M193 is a full metal jacket, boat tail projectile. What is a boat tail? Obviously, this ain't a 5.56 projectile, it's a 338. Future project. As you see, it tapers in the rear. That is your boat tail. It makes the projectile more aerodynamic so it can hold on to its velocity a little bit longer. Boat tails are the way to go for most applications. Some applications, no. It's better to have a flat base. Different video topic. We won't cover that today. Freebore. Again, generally speaking, and there was a guy that took a whole mess of barrels, 5.56 to 5.56 wild chambering to 223 chambering, and he measured all the three free bores, and to be honest, there were some 223s with free bores longer than 5.56, like what the 5.56 free bore should actually be, and some 5.56 free bores that were actually shorter than 223. It all comes down to the manufacturer, but 5.56 is supposed to have a longer free bore. That is to accommodate the M856 tracer round. The M856 tracer round is a 64 grain projectile, but the projectile is longer than an 80 grain Sierra Match King projectile. That's actually why your AR-15s, your mil-spec ones, will have a 1.7 twist barrel. Because of the SAW program, When they were coming out with the M16A2, they wanted to be able to fire the same ammunition as the SAW program. The SAW program shot the 856 tracer, and that requires a 1/7 twist barrel because it's a very unstable projectile because it's really, really long and it's really, really light, so it has a tendency to tumble. So you have to spin it extremely fast to make it stabilize. That is why your M16s, A2s, your M4s, everything have a 1/7 twist barrel to be able to shoot that particular projectile. When everyone knows that a 1/9 twist is the best barrel twist for 55 or 62 grain projectiles. Now, where the real difference comes in with 5.56 and 223. Now, I'm very new to this information. The reason I'm new to this information is because I never purchased 223. When I first got into AR-15s, I started looking at like 6.8 SPC, 223 77 grain, 223 69 grain open tip match, and then I realized that, oh my god, none of these projectiles have advantages over the M193 or the M855 until you get to like 500 yards. I'm not going to shoot my AR-15 that far. In my area, about 300 yards, that's the rule. If you find a spot where you can shoot farther than 300 yards, you know you're going into that spot. So why in the shit would you take an AR-15? You'd carry something in like a 308 or something with a projectile that actually does good work at those ranges. So basically, I run M193 exclusively unless I am running a military grade sighting system or some sort of military style sighting system, because this is calibrated for the M855, which is the green tip. If I'm running this kind of sighting system, I have to run M855 so my ballistics work. Yeah, they would be pretty close with 5.56 M193, but I might as well just run the projectile that it's calibrated for. Why would I not? So if I'm running like an ACOG with a BDC for M855, or I'm running some sort of A2 sighting system, yes, then I'm going with M855. But say, for example, I didn't have this military sight on here and I was just running like a red dot. No, this would be 5.56 M193 because it's a faster projectile and it has more advantages over the M855. Again, with the caveat that I'm not running some sort of military sighting system. With this particular rifle, yes, this is an A2 sighting system, but it's a national match configuration, so it doesn't have the BDC on the wheel. So I got my range card with how many clicks I need to turn for different ranges, and then I just run M193 out of this, because M193 is the better performing 5.56 projectile. Again, like, let me rehash here. So I run M193 exclusively unless it has a military sighting system, which is calibrated for M855. That's the only time I run that because, like I said, your 77s, your 69s, all that, they don't have any advantages until you get way farther than I'm going to shoot my AR-15s. With one catch. And that would be 45 grain 223, because this has very unique armor penetration capabilities. I've tested this. You can go check out my old videos. This slides through armor, where those two do not. So I didn't know that the velocities on the box were for different length barrels. So your M193 or your 5.56, the velocity on the box will be for a 16-inch or a 20-inch. This particular velocity is for a 16-inch barrel. And that's cruising for a 16-inch. Out of a 20-inch barrel, it shoots much faster. The velocity on this particular box is for a 24-inch barrel. And this velocity is still pretty generous because when you use the velocity chart, you should only be seeing like maybe a 200 feet per second difference from like a 20-inch barrel to a 24-inch barrel. And this is saying 3240, and when I chronoed this was at 2,800 feet per second. And I'll play all my chronograph footage right now. Alright, let's start off with Remington, 55 grain. Claiming 3250 on the box. Now we'll go 3 rounds of Browning, 3240 on the box. Fiocchi, 3240 on the box. I think I missed one, so I'm going to shoot one more Fiocchi. I can't remember if the light's got to be blue or orange. Anyway, PMC on the case, 3240. Winchester M193.
Have a good day.
You too. $32.05, $31.82, and just for comparison, here's Winchester 223. So yeah, definitely a difference between 5.56. To get the performance you're looking for out of your 20-inch barrel 5.56, you gotta run M193. So that's the real ultimate, like, noticeable difference. Your 5.56, this velocity on the box is for a 16 or a 20-inch barrel, and it has a specific velocity window it's aiming for. Your 223 velocity, this can be for a 22-inch barrel, a 24-inch barrel, hell, it could even be for a 26 or a 28-inch barrel. It doesn't have a specific velocity window it's trying to hit. They probably worked up this load with their test barrel, found the most accurate velocity, and that's what they're going with. With your 5.56, this is supposed to be a specific recipe. This particular brand it does hit that window, and the velocity is what's key, because that will push you at 2,100 feet per second at 300 yards.
Temporary wound cavity, as we expand and recover from, is different when projectiles hit at greater than 2,200 feet a second. At that point, it appears we have surpassed the elasticity capability of human tissue, and that temporary wound cavity begins tearing at its limits and margins and becomes the permanent wound cavity, which also is the conclusion why people who are center punched with rifle projectiles typically succumb much quicker than people who are hit with handgun projectiles. The byproduct of that also seems that when a rifle projectile at those velocities bypasses an organ, you will still have organic damage, whereas a handgun projectile needs to directly hit a vital organ to do organic damage.
Basically, you want to be at 2,100 feet per second at whatever range you plan on shooting at. I mean, obviously, once you get to like 300 and 500 yards, no projectiles will do that anymore. Well, there will be some, but not very many. So then you start looking more at kinetic energy. But when you're talking about this kind of rifle, with this size of cartridge, 2,200 is extremely important. Once you drop below that, that cartridge just doesn't have the power that it does with it. So, To recap, the real big difference between 5.56 and 223 is where the velocity is taken from. This velocity on 5.56 will be on what size barrels you're going to use, which will be like a 16, 20 inch, 14.5, something like that. Your 223, you don't know. It could be for any barrel length. But the 5.56 is hitting a specific velocity number, and that's what we want. So, should you buy ammunition for your AR-15? Make sure it's 5.56. I would go with M193 or M855, depending on if you have a military sight. If you have something with a military sight, the BDC is calibrated for M855. So then you want to run M855. If you don't have some sort of BDC, military calibrated sight, and you can set your sight for whatever, like for example on this, or on that particular red dot, you want to go M193 because you get the faster velocity and it performs better than the M855. Anyway, I appreciate you watching my channel. If you'd like to support the channel, got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on that and then doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway, I'll kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.